It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France. And we have Florence Villemona with us here on the set to help us do that. Hi, Flo. This week, you're going to talk about something that is a yearly occurrence here in France, something that's dreaded by some, it's loved by others. We're talking, of course, about the moment when summer finally comes to an end and people return to real life.
That's right. And we've already talked on French Connections about the fact that France really grinds to a halt during the summer. Between the end of June and the end of August, well, not very much happens. And so today we're going to talk about the whiplash that happens when real life kicks back in. Now, some might say that's not typically French. A lot of other countries go through this kind of transition, but what's simply a collection of unrelated events in other countries is a social phenomenon here in France, and of course, there's a word for it, as all things French. It is la rentrée. Now, it's often translated as the re-entry or back to school, but it's much more than that. It's kind of a renaissance, actually. After the summer's shut down, a new beginning. Streets become busy again, shops open up, there's a whole new calendar of cultural events, and the French media are obsessed with la rentrée.
La rentrée, la rentrée,
La rentrée.
la rentrée tout court.
La rentrée, autre rentrée.
L'heure de la rentrée va bientôt sonner.
La rentrée, c'est maintenant.
Et après la rentrée politique, la rentrée tout court, la rentrée des classes.
Oh, yes, we talk a lot about la rentrée, but the one that we think about the most, at least in my mind, is the one that was just mentioned there, la rentrée des classes, back to school.
That's right. And this week, most of France's 12 million students are going back to school. So it's a time when you get your school supplies, you get your new outfit, and you can also be nervous about it. That goes for students and for teachers. Take a listen.
He's scared.
I'm a little stressed, but eager to get to work.
I've never been in front of a class before. I guess I've just got to jump in. It's what I've always wanted to do, so we'll see if it works out.
Now, the end of summer also marks the beginning of the political season, and the gloves really come off as this summer truce that we tend to see comes to an end.
That's right. It's called the rentrée politique. It's a moment when suntanned politicians start tackling their suntanned rivals. Now, typically mainstream parties hold something called an université d'été, which is neither a university and it doesn't take place during the summer. It's more of a party conference. But this year is a little particular because we're heading into the campaign season ahead of next year's presidential election, and potential candidates on the left and on the right have been holding rallies, they've been releasing books, they've been essentially trying to set the tone and grab all the media attention during la rentrée.
So the kids are back at school, the politicians are on the campaign trail. What about everybody else?
Well, it's back to the grind, isn't it, Jeannie? And the French media, as we've seen, take a particular look at la rentrée, but particularly a side effect of la rentrée. They call it les blues de la rentrée, a kind of depression that overcomes you when, you have to go back to work and you start deleting or answering the hundreds of emails that you've received in the meantime. Take a listen to some of these depressed workers.
It's daunting when you look at your inbox, but you've just got to start.
How many you got?
656, exactly.
All of a sudden, there are crowds everywhere, in the metro, in the street, when you get to work. There are people and noise, people running everywhere.
When you're on vacation, you're in charge. When you get back to work, you lose your independence. You return to your boss, your colleagues, a whole environment of constraints and obligations. The longer you go on vacation, the harder it is to come back.
Now, some people decide to fight the rentrée blues by getting back into shape.
That's right. La rentrée is kind of a second fresh start to the year. In January, of course, you have the New Year's, Bonne année. And then you have la rentrée in September, which is, kind of an opportunity to have a new you, if you will, do all those things that you've been putting off. Take a listen.
Are you ready to take on the rentrée?
I've decided to get in shape. During my vacation, I ate way too much. And now I want to get fit.
I've decided to exercise to feel better, lose some weight and get some muscle.
There's definitely a peak in activity at our gym. September and October are our biggest months. It might be linked to those good resolutions people make after eating too much ice cream on vacation.
I can personally attest to this one because I came home from work yesterday and my husband had bought weights to start working out. Now, if you want to escape this harsh reality of the rentrée, you don't necessarily want to start working out, you can also head to your local bookstore because there's something called the literary rentrée.
That's right, and this is one of my favorite things about La Rentrée in France. It's kind of part of the French cultural exception that we've already explored here in French Connections. Over a 6-week period between mid-August and the end of September, a torrent of books are released. I mean, last year, nearly 600 novels were released during this literary rentrée. Now, why is there this torrent of books? Well, essentially, publishing companies are competing ahead of the literary award season, which take place in October, when you have things like the Prix Féminin, the Prix Goncourt, all these things. So, as you can imagine, book fiends love it, and so do bookstores, of course.
I get really excited during the literary rentrée. I buy piles of books. It's a huge turnover for us. We do 13% of our annual sales between the end of August and the month of September.
Now, not to be left out, of course, the media also has their rentrée. You have all sorts of new shows appearing, some shows disappearing, but do rest assured, French Connections isn't going anywhere this rentrée.
And we're so happy about that. Thank you so much, Florence Villeminot, for that look at this rentrée. Happy rentrée to you wherever you are. And don't forget, if you want to ask any other questions about what's going on here in France and take advantage of Flo's knowledge, you can just send her a tweet at Flo Villeminot.